Today we will discuss about thermocouple materials, and this class will be for third semester diploma electrical students. So we will start with thermocouple materials, which is from the chapter special materials. So here when two wires of different metals are joined together, an EMF exists across the junction, which is dependent on the type of metal and alloys used. So we should understand what will happen if there are two different metals joined in an electrical circuit. So there is an EMF exists between these two materials. So exactly from this principle also, this thermocouple material is based upon when two different metals or wires are joined, then an EMF exists across the junction, which is dependent on the type of metals and alloys used, and they are directly proportional to the temperature of the junction. That means the amount of the temperature rise will be proportional to the difference in the potential. So when one tries to measure this EMF, more junctions are to be made, which also give rise to EMF. So when all the junctions are at the same temperature, the resultant EMF will not be zero. The resultant EMF is proportional to the temperature difference of the junction and is called thermoelectric effect. Now students, this thermoelectric effect is very important and it is quite often asked in your semester exams. So the resultant EMF is proportional to the temperature difference of the junction and is called the thermoelectric EMF. The EMF produced by a thermocouple is very small, but it can be measured with reasonable accuracy by using a sensitive moving coil millivoltmeter. So by deploying a millivoltmeter, and that to a very sensitive one, we can measure the small voltages that can be calibrated to this temperatures, so which can be calibrated in terms of temperatures. So as mentioned earlier, the thermocouples are made of different materials. The materials to be used will depend upon the range of the temperature to be measured. Now there is a table in your screen which will illustrate you that materials for thermocouples at cold junction, that is about from 10 degrees centigrade. So what are the materials? Let us discuss. If it is of copper constant ton, then the temperature range will be minus 200 to 400, and the EMF generated will be 26.6 millivolt. So just imagine millivolts, that is not equal to 1 volt also. So very sensitive voltmeters has to be employed. Now for iron or constant ton, you will have 0 to 900 temperature range, and the EMF generated will be 26.7. For nickel or nickel chromium, you will have 0 to 1100 degree centigrade. The EMF will be around 10 millivolt. For platinum and platinum rhodium, it will be 500 to 1400 degree centigrade, and the EMF generated will be around 4.5 degree or millivolt. Thermocouples can be used for the measurement of temperature. So with the necessity for observing, or for calculating the temperature without exactly touching, we can also measure the temperature. So if one junction is at cold junction, it is held at a known as a constant temperature. The EMF produced becomes the measure of temperature of the other junction. This principle of the thermocouple pyrometer. Now we will discuss about the bimetals. Bimetal is made of two metallic strips of unlike metals. Alloys with different metals of thermal expansion. At a certain temperature, the strip will bend and actuate a switch or a lever of a switch. The bimetal can be heated directly or indirectly. When heated, the element bends so that the metal with the greater coefficient of expansion is on the outside of the arc formed, while that with smaller coefficient is on the inside. When cooled, the element bends in other directions. Alloys of iron and nickel with low coefficient of thermal expansions are used as one element of the bimetallic strip. The other element consists of materials having high value of coefficient of thermal expansion, that are iron, nickel, constantan and brass. There are other metals also. So bimetallic strip are used in electrical apparatus and in devices such as relay and regulators. For example, in order to maintain a constant temperature in a heater, a simple bimetallic regulator may be used. So by using only a bimetallic strip only, we can use it as a safety device which will just disconnect the supply when there is a over current or when the bimetallic strip bends. So a bimetallic or a bimetal relay or release can be used for overload protection of electric motor or any electric circuit. In such an arrangement, the electric circuit is passed through the bimetallic strip. If the current rises above its setting, the bimetallic strip are adjusted for a particular current. The strip will be heated enough to bend and break the circuit directly or through an intermediate relay. Soldering materials. Now students, soldering materials are an alloy of two or more metals of low melting point and are used for base metals is known as soldering. The soldering is a very important phenomena which is usually performed in the field of electrical engineering, because without extending the line with proper connection, the field of electricity or electrical engineering will be very much difficult. So we need soldering very essentially, right? So soldering has to be done quite often. So the alloy used for joining the metals is called solder. The most common solder is composed of 50% lead and 50% tin. Its melting point is about 185 degrees centigrade and tensile strength is around 385 kg per centimeter square. And electrical conductivity is about 10% that of copper. Many commercial solders, however, contain large percentage of lead and some antimony with less tin. Good quality solders for electrical joints should have at least 40% tin, as the electrical conductivity of lead is only about half that of tin. For proper soldering, flux is to be used. In soldering process, the application of flux serves to remove oxides from the surface to be soldered. They deoxidize the metals at the time the soldering element is added. For ordinary soldering, used in soldering, sometimes flux is incorporated in the solder wire itself. In such a case, no extra flux is required or necessary. Solders are of two types. Basically, these two types are soft solders and hard solders. Soft solders are composed of lead and tin in various proportions. Harder solders may be of any solders with a melting point above that of tin and lead. Common hard solders are silver solders, aluminum solders, copper aluminum solders, etc. Hard solders having high melting point and therefore they are used for metals which can withstand high amount of temperatures. The most important application of soft solders is in electronic devices and hard solders in power apparatus for making permanent connections. So shoulders and fluxes for aluminum cable joining. So as we all know that for joining aluminum cables, this ordinary shoulders do not work perfectly. So how to solder this aluminum cables or joints? Aluminum cannot be soldered using conventional solders. So how to join them? And fluxes in view of the extremely tough oxide film present on the surface of aluminum. London Associates Fries Metal Foundries developed a suitable solder and flux for joining aluminum, and as a result Alka P solder was developed. So this Alka P solder is prepared under special process from exceptional high purity raw materials. This is flux. It is an improved variety of organic flux which is used with Alka P for aluminum cable joining. This is on decomposition at a temperature a little below the joining temperature of approximately 316 degrees centigrade, removes the refractory oxides from the strands of the core and makes the surface susceptible to solders. Because of the low specific gravity of the flux residues, they are replaced by the solder, forming a sound metal to metal contact. Now, it possesses an added advantage over the inorganic type of reaction, flux, and welding techniques. In a much in as much as the soldering temperature can be maintained as low as 316 degree centigrade, thus avoiding damage to the paper impregnation and the insulation. Fuse and fuse metal. Now, this fuse is a protective device which consists of a thin strip of wire. This wire or strip is placed with the circuit. It has to protect so that the circuit current flows through it. When this current is too large, the temperature of the wire or strip will increase till the wire or strip melts, thus breaking the circuit and interrupting the supply. The current is cut off by the fuse as follows. How this current cut off the supply, let us now discuss. Upon melting the wire, the metal ions form an arc and constitute a conducting path through which the current continues to flow. In order to quench the arc, the resistance of the arc path must rise to an extent that the available voltage is no longer able to sustain the arc. Now, for a proper quenching of the arc in a fuse, the following measures can be taken. So, what are the measures? The material chosen for a fuse wire is that which whose metal ions after melting have low conductivity. Silver or an alloy of silver are such materials. If the temperature of the arc path is kept low, its resistance and therefore the voltage drop along the arc will be high due to less mobility of the metal ions and electrons. The cooling of the arc in a fuse can be achieved by embedding the fuse wire in quartz. And it is done in cartridge and HRC fuses. Now, the higher the pressure of the gas in which the arcing takes place, the higher will be the required voltage to sustain the arc. It is achieved by putting the melting wire in an explosion tight enclosure in which a pressure is automatically built up by the heat produced by the arc. Now, there is a diagram shown to you, students. Here you have an indicating disc. You have some porcelain also which will act as an insulator. There is a quartz, fuse element, indicating wire and gypsum. So from the above discussion, it is evident that a rewirable fuse is not at all suitable or suited to quench an arc properly, because any type of wire can be used and no proper cooling of the wire can be provided and no pressure can be built up. Although still widely used in this country, rewirable fuse should be discarded and instead cartridge fuse should be used. Now, the diagram 7.1 which I have just told you shows the cross section of a cartridge fuse, and the fuse material should possess the following properties. So what are the properties? We will now discuss about the fuse material, because this fuse material, if wrongly selected, then what will happen? It will not protect the human, neither the machine will be saved. Why? Because it will be unable to interrupt this circuit, and as a result more amount of current will be allowed to flow in, to pass through the circuit. As a result, the motor or sometimes the personnel involved with the machine be may be severely electrocuted. So we should avoid using fuse wires just casually. We should know the proper rating of the wire and a proper fuse should be inserted. Now, the properties are: it should possess low resistivity. This means thin wire can be used, which will give less metal vapor, and after melting of the wire, less metal vapor in the arc gives lower conductivity, and thus making or makes the quenching of the arc easier. So students, if the material used is of low resistivity, that means the wire can be used is of thin wires can be used, and it will give you a lower conductivity and will allow you to quench the arc easily. Second property is its conductivity. It should also have low conductivity of the metal vapor itself. The other property is low melting point. Apart from low resistivity and low conductivity, it should also possess low melting point. So this means the temperature of the fuse material for normal currents stays at low value. So after exceeding this value, the fuse material will be it will get melted. So originally only lead was used as a fuse material because it was having low melting point, but as the resistivity of the lead is high, thick wires are required. So due to these reasons, the use of lead is now very, uh, I mean, they are a very reduced way. No more only lead is used. We are using rather the alloys of lead and tin. So now the lead was earlier used. Now they are not used as they were used earlier. So but as the resistivity of the lead is high, thick wires are required for rewirable fuses. Alloy of tin or lead or tinned copper wires are commonly used. In cartridge fuses, silver and silver alloys are used in fuses of lower ratings, and copper alloys are used in fuses of higher rating. An important characteristics of a fuse material is its current time relationship. So for wire in which the heat is dissipated largely by radiation, the fusing current the fusing current can be calculated by using the following formula. So what is this formula or the relationship? It is I is equal to, what is this I? This is the fusing current. I is equal to A d to the power n. So what is this I? As I told, it is the fusing current in amperes. D is the wire diameter in centimeters, and A is the constant whose value varies from material to material. The value of a constant A for some material for copper is 2530, for aluminum it is 1870, for iron it is 777 or 777. Similarly for tin it is 405.5, and for lead it is 304.6. The approximate value of N is 1.5. The rating of any fuse depends entirely on the dimensions, mounting, surrounding powders or liquids, enclosures, and other factors which affect its heat dissipating capacity and its ability to extinguish arc after fusing. Now, dehydrating materials. Now, this silica gel, it is an inorganic chemical, a colloidal, highly absorbent silica used is as a dehumidifying and a dehydrating agent. Now, students, this electrical circuits or any electrical part is very much sensitive to moist or water. So, they should not be incorporated with water or moist areas. So, how to make sure that moist is not associated with the circuit, which has to be kept in isolation with water or moisture. So usually there is a practice of placing silica gel or dehydrating agents. So these dehydrating agents are silica gel. You might have seen in any electronic circuit, if you have disassembled, inside this circuit you will find some small packets of white color, and it has been cautioned you that do not swallow. So those kind of things are nothing but silica gel. They are very poisonous. You should not consume them also unknowingly. So in every electronic circuit, inside every electronic circuit, you will find dehydrating agent, which are usually this silica gel, and they are the catalyst carrier, and sometimes calcium chloride and silica gel are used in dehydrating breathers. To remove moisture from the air entering a transformer as it breathes, silica gel breathers are a more recent development and are replacing the calcium chloride breathers. Now, earlier, these calcium chlorides were employed for restricting the passage of the moisture. This calcium chloride were used earlier, but now we are using silica gel instead of this calcium chloride. So the main advantage is that it becomes saturated when moisture is does not restrict breathing as does chlorium chloride. Silica gel when dry is blue in color, and uh, color changes to pale pink as it being saturated with moisture. If it is found to contain excessive moisture, it must be replaced or reconditioned. It can be dried by heating it an open container at a temperature of between 150 degrees centigrade and 200 degrees centigrade for 2 hours. Calcium chloride can be dried by heating it in a same manner at a temperature between 180 degree and 200 degree centigrade with complete dry. Now students, this silica gel and the calcium chloride both are dehydrating agents. So in the earlier days, that means with the uh, that means before the invention of this silica gel as a dehydrating agent, we were using calcium chloride. So this calcium chloride, where, let me just mark you where is this calcium chloride so that you can remember it. So this calcium chloride were used before the invention of this silica gel as a dehydrating agent. But the advantages of its main advantages was that it became saturated with moisture. It does not restrict breathing as does calcium chloride. Silica gel when dry is in blue in color, and color changes to pale pink as it is when it becomes saturated. So the temperature range is also given for both of these materials. So these two special materials have different temperature for their so that they can be restored back. So what is the temperature? For silica gel, it is from 150 degree to 200 degree centigrades, which can be kept at a open container and a temperature of 150 degree and 200 degree can be applied. And for this calcium chloride, it is from 180 degree centigrade to 200 degree centigrade. So thank you students for watching.